Welcome, players of A Player 2. I am your host of this discussion, Jason Hawkins from Player 2, obviously. I am here with two of my compatriots in arms. I have Jam Walker, freelancer.
Hello.
How you doing?
A little jet lagged, but all right.
Yeah, well, it's all right is better than bad, I think. I am also here with Fergus Halliday from reviews.org.
Yes, that's me.
What's
how
the
you
happy
doing?
haps?
I'm really thrilled that the week is almost over. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a very good way to be. We are talking Kingdom Come Deliverance II tonight, which is launching on the 5th, after years and years of time after the previous game has launched, or the first game. Both of you, have you played Kingdom Come Deliverance 1?
I played the first one for review when I was working at PC World Australia. I don't remember specifically how many years ago. It was 2019, right?
I think so. It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Times.
And I sort of went into it reviewing it, kind of knowing not a huge amount about the series and the content of it. I just know that I like cool open RPGs, and I was trying to review as many things as possible back then. And I had a kind of very miserable time with it, where I played through about 60 hours or something of the game, got I believe at least past the halfway point, and then my save data corrupted in the review period, and I had to start it over again.
I love that.
And that kind of broke me a little bit. But in the process of having to go and replay it a second time, I ended up clicking with it a lot more and end up really, really enjoying it. And it's just kind of like, if I had to describe it to like an everyday person, it's just really interesting in the sense that it's nice to see other studios make games like Fallout and Elder Scrolls that are not Bethesda. And that's the thing that is the most compelling to me about it.
Yeah. What about you, Jam? What's your experience with the series thus far?
I didn't play it back in the day. I played 5 minutes of the first one a couple of days before I got the review code for this one, because I knew it was doing the review and I wanted to see if it ran on Steam Deck and all this kind of stuff. And that was my experience with the original. I mean, my experience with the original also too, just culturally, was being very, very aware of everything that surrounded it, the drama, the exhausting discourse on all angles, and then kind of just being like, yeah, that game seems very not for me anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of lucky in this regard. Like, I don't hang out on social media at all. I gave it up years and years ago, and I feel so much better for it. Not that I recommend everyone does it, but I had no idea of the drama around this game. There is, without getting too much into it just yet, if we touch upon it, there is very much a leopards eating faces movement going on right now in regards to this game, the sequel, in a very different cultural time. I think that will be very interesting to see how it pans out once the game launches. I made the horrible mistake, I never do this either, is I started looking at the Steam discussion board to see what people were saying about it, and instantly noped my way out of it because it was horrendous. But I won't talk about that just yet. On my side, I played it back when it came out. Originally, it was messy. It was very horrific to play back then. But over the years, it has gotten a lot better. Mods obviously help out games that have their issues. Before the second one came out, I think I played over the last month probably about 130 hours of the first game with DLC. Loved it, and I will probably return to that at some stage when reviews slow down. So probably 6 to 12 months down the line. I played the hell out of it. I adore this type of game. I have this thing in my mind where I look at this game and I look at Fallout and Elder Scrolls, as you mentioned, Fergus. I think they're inherently very different games. I don't know why I feel this way about it, but I look at this one and go, oh yeah, this is almost a complete sandbox. There is a lot of weird stuff you can do in this game, but I guess you can also do those things in Skyrim and those type of games as well, and they have massive mod support. So I don't know why I have that disconnect in my mind, but like this game is unrelenting in its mechanics. Like you have to absolutely be on its level for better and worse if you want to play it. Like the sword play is complicated and like this is something I learned from playing the first game. Like Henry, the protagonist of the game, knows nothing. He is a worthless human being. He has no skills, despite being a blacksmith's son. Has no skills of like literally anything, and like by the time you get to the end of Kingdom Come Deliverance I, he has had so much growth that it feels like I don't know. I imagine I don't have kids, but I kind of imagine this is how a parent feels, where they're like, "Oh, they can do
He's all grown
basic
up.
things now."
My beautiful
Yeah,
idiot
yeah.
son.
Yes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like the end of I definitely had went through that same journey where like you start from square one and just have to be like, okay, I don't know anything about how to exist in 15th century Bohemia. I think it's 15th or 14th century. It's
15.
important, but it's not 15th century Bohemia. I don't know anything about blacksmithing. I don't know anything about herbalism. I can't hunt a deer. What are you talking about? And just like gradually having to just like, okay, I've got to work this out. There has to be a way for me to do the thing they've asked me to do. And just gradually getting more and more confident and better and better. And then you do reach the end, and you're like, all right, let's do it. The story, let's get into it. Let's start this off, and then the game's dead.
Yeah.
Which was kind of where it left me anyway.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's such a wild experience. But
Hmm.
so this is the second game. It comes. I don't know how much. I didn't see how long after the first game it takes place. I think it's like a couple of months.
No, I think it's like immediate. From memory, it's like immediate. Like the last quest in the first game is you and Hans riding down the road off the map to go
Yeah.
to.
Oh yeah, I suppose that is true.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's DLC, and I did not play the DLC, so there might be
Hmm.
some shenanigans there. But
Oh, the
it's
DLC's
like
good.
fairly contiguous in my mind, like maybe a few weeks or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought the thing they did in this about like whenever you have a game like this where you're going to make a sequel and you've done all this work in the previous game to make him like to make your character strong, then you come into the sequel, you can't come in as strong, but they do that and then it's like they take it away from you. How do you feel about the way they took away your skills in this game?
I don't know. It's just it is what it is. Like it's one of those things where I think that they mostly mitigate some of it by the fact that the Trotsky region is kind of almost like a little isolated island away from the main plot in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Where you're just kind of it's almost like the training wheels zone.
Yeah.
But also it's one of those things where they do want people to try the game and jump into the series from the second entry, so they kind of have to offer something kind of akin to that power curve.
Yeah.
And I think that when all's said and done, I think that two does kind of have like a cake and eat it two thing where you get the experience of starting at square one and kind of making your way up in Act One, and then in the second half of the game, kind of going, okay, so here's a map that's just you are already leveled up. Here's stuff to do.
Yep.
I kind of appreciated that about it, but it's one of those things where it's like it does feel a little cheap and tropey, but I don't know, like it is what it is. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. I think they
I
hand
don't know. I
waved
don't
it
know what a better
away.
solution is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what a better solution is. Really.
I think
What
they
do you
hand
think?
waved it away at some stage when they're like,
Hmm.
I think Henry says, "Oh, he's learning from a sword person, sword
Hmm.
trainer," and he goes, "Oh, you know, I kind of got into trouble and I kind of lost my confidence. Can you help me get it back?" And I'm like,
Hmm.
I guess.
Yeah.
Jam, this probably would have been easier for you because you hadn't had that whole experience of like 100 hours before playing with Henry as this super powerful dude. So you're kind of starting at square one, where you see him a little bit strong, and maybe that's something to aspire to. But how did you feel about the way it takes away your skills fairly early?
Well, I don't feel like I wrap my head around how to do anything until like way too far into this thing. So it would have just been nice in general if like for me, like Henry hadn't lost so many skills. If Henry just
Mm,
started off a little bit
Hmm.
like he's a big idiot child who can't do anything. Like
Yep.
he just cannot do anything.
Yeah, that's Henry for you.
Yeah, it's such an uphill battle. Like you practically have to teach him to read because half the books you pick up, it's like, no, I can't study this yet.
Yeah.
Which is
you say that, but
level, but like,
yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
You say that, but in the first game, you did actually have to learn to read.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
good.
can actually go
Cool.
through the entire first game not knowing how to read.
In this one,
No,
you start with some
it's-
reading skills, some
Yeah.
literacy.
Lord, okay.
Yeah, the way he learns to read as well is absolutely bananas. Like the priest says, "Oh, go read this book," and all the letters are like mixed up and they barely make any sense, and you like kind of have to get the gist of this fable. It's telling you.
It's like a dyslexia thing for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then after that, he goes, "Oh, well, that wasn't so hard. Now go read Latin," and you're like, "What the hell are you saying? I am learning to read. Please, God, why are you doing this to me?" I think that some of the. No, you go.
Out of curiosity, Jam, what did you like? We came to it having played the first one, kind of knowing that the general arc of it is that your skills all start at one, and the more you do anything, the higher the skill goes. Was that like intuitive to you? How did you sort of grow up with that?
I mean, because there is a lot of like design language very broadly, with like Bethesda role playing games, that kind of stuff. Like it's like I didn't necessarily expect that to be the case for how like you grew as a character, but it didn't surprise me, and I understood that that's what was happening pretty quick.
Okay.
Because it does give you some choices in that opening few hours of like, someone will be like talking to Henry about like his past or whatever, and you get different choices to be like, oh, I solved the problem this way through swordcraft, through brawling, through talking my way out, and I picked talking my way out every time because I have always been a person who finds like talking my way out of a jam to be more interesting in a role playing game than fighting my way out. Then I got thrown into a lot of mandatory fights throughout the adventure and regretted that decision. Yeah, I jumping into the sequel, not having paid that much attention to the original, not having played it. I understand, like, I knew the premise of the original, like, the whole thing is, like, you know, your village was burnt down, your father's sword was taken, whatever. So having those threads pick up from the very start was like, okay, cool, I guess that didn't really get resolved in the first game, great. But beyond that, maybe Hans, you know, your lord that you serve is meant to be someone you, like, come to appreciate over the course of the first game. I still just find him an insufferable pillock who I just want to see hang. I just want to walk away and leave him to his fate every time he gets into a jam. So I guess just as someone coming into the sequel pretty blind, I've been struggling with narrative, with mechanics, with just how the game demands you play it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the new player experience, like the new player experience for Kingdom Come 1 was atrocious. There is like you get like a sword training for with a dude in the town for like a few minutes. Yeah, he just beats the hell out of you, and it's only like 5 minutes long. And in every other game, you'd come out of that and go, "All right, yeah, I'm not going to be great, but I can work it out."
Yeah.
Henry is not that guy. He is useless in battle. Like it's not. He swings his weapon so damn slowly when his stat is low that I think a lot of people bounced off the combat in the first one and just played like half an hour or an hour and went, I am never touching this again. And I totally get that. I'm interested to see if that was a different like new player experience this time around, but it sounds like a bit, but not really.
Well, it seems like they made a. Sorry, you go.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, the core story does teach you, like, you know, in the first hour, you are like taught combat and the basics of how to do things, like as a game should do. But as I found, like, over the course of say like the first 15 hours or whatever of the first act, I was really hating the game because I felt like I was terrible at everything. And you know, like, okay, this was an unusual game in that we had like a good like month to get the review done. Typically with game reviews, you don't. You have days maybe a week at best.
Yeah.
So my way of doing things tends to be like, well, let's plow through the core story. Let's touch on some side stuff, but let's try to stick to the core story to get through this thing.
Mm.
And I very quickly realized after I started hitting very, very hard skill barriers, and not just like, like Henry's developed role playing number crunchy skills and gear, but like my own also just skill limit barriers in the core story. Like, I feel like the first. Well, I mean, the first whole area of the game, which is probably the first half of the game, really,
Mhm.
it kind of wants you to do everything, I feel, because so much of the side quests are like, there'll be a side quest that's kind of built around horses, there'll be one that's kind of built around stealth and crime, and there's one that's kind of built around like your dog, and like there's like it's trying to teach you all of the very, very systems heavy systems through all the massive long side quest and opening act. And I don't necessarily think that's a false way to design a
Yeah.
game like this. It's interesting, but goddamn, you're going to have a rough time unless you really wander the world and start engaging with side stuff. And I don't know that a lot of players will.
Yeah, I'd actually be super interested in finding some of the fail states in this, because in the first game, you get your dog, you get your horse. They're both given to you pretty early in the game. One is DLC, actually. I think the dog is DLC that came out later. But coming into this, like, I don't think I wonder if you skip those side quests of getting your dog back, getting your horse back. I wonder what the fail state is, because not gonna lie, I ran around that first area before I did, like, the major milestone is like going to the wedding. There's a wedding, you've got to get in.
And that's established within the first few hours. Like that, that's your arc in the first act.
The first few you got there in a few hours.
No,
I mean the first like
40 hours.
Yes, so did I.
Yeah. I used so much time, like, going hunting and doing all this other stuff. Like,
also because I couldn't figure out how to get to the damn wedding for so long.
Yep. Like, I was running around the first area, and I'm like, I stole a horse because I'm like, I need a horse. I can't keep running around like this, and I couldn't work out well enough how to, like, tame a stolen horse. And then, like, later on, there's just a quest that gives you the horse, but I didn't do that for like 30 hours, and it was miserable. Absolutely miserable before that.
I can't believe you're a dirty horse thief. My Henry is a good boy, and he's gonna walk using the legs that God gave him.
See, this is the interesting thing as well. Like, I like I said, I do wonder if you skip getting your horse, if you skip getting your dog, what is the fact? Like, do you just not get them? Like, obviously you can buy a horse.
I didn't get the horse for ages, and so I put a bunch of skill points into being able to run faster and sprint for longer. Like my character building for the first 30 hours was about lessening the parts of the game that were annoying the piss out of me.
Yep, I feel that.
I will say that from my memory may be failing me, but I do feel like there's a lot more of perks in that direction in the second game than the first game. Whereas the first game, I feel like there were perks that made you better and stuff, but there were not as many that are like, do you hate this mechanic? What if we just gave you a perk that just cuts that in half?
Yeah, the only one I can think of in the first game is around herbalism, where it's like, you kind of know how this works, let's make some shortcuts. Which is good. Like, the other part of the first game is, like, a lot of your main level perks have positives, but also a lot of negatives associated with them. They're like, oh, you can do this, but also your strength is going to be a lot lower. And you're like, son of a bitch. It's such a wild game. What you were talking about, Fergus, you mentioned, like, Henry is a good boy. Like,
He's a good Christian boy.
He is. Like, but it's such an, like, I felt, this is like one of the first games where I felt so connected to the character. Like, there were actual decisions that I would not make as a character. Oh, as a person, I'm not a character. But Henry does those things. And I'm like, it's such a wild thing for me to have that feeling where I'm just like, I'm not doing this because it's fun. I'm doing it because that's what I think the character will do. Like, for me, Henry is a devout Christian. He's a God-fearing guy. He is, like, kind of scared of nobility and will do anything that harms asks because that is his liege lord. And he will get into fist fights, but he will always try and do the right thing because his parents were poor and that's how they raised him. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like, did you guys feel connected to Henry in the same way, or did you just make the decisions that you thought would be the most interesting or easiest?
I mean, I still don't like Henry. I still don't like any of the characters in this. Like, they flit it between being boring or insufferable for the most part.
That's crazy. I love these characters personally.
I also had a lot of fun with them. But again, it's so hard to detach that from like having the entire first game of like foundational characterization to a lot of them. And there were a lot of characters in the second half, especially where there were characters returning from the first game. And they're just like, you remember this person, right? And I'm like, not really, but I'm sure the cobwebs will clear out eventually.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They Henry can be a little bit hit or miss, where he's kind of this like he has a defined characterization and stuff, but also there's a little bit of wiggle room for you to sort of push him in different directions, and I find that really compelling. Yeah, and I know it's interesting that you see Henry as like he's loyal to Hans. I see it more like he's like his foster dad asked him to take care of Hans, and he's gonna be a good older brother slash sibling and keep Hans out of trouble, even though Hans is a complete idiot a lot of the time.
Hans is really interesting as a character. Like, it takes in the first game, when you meet him, he is a piece of shit.
Yeah,
he is the worst. Like, so much worse than what you think he is now, Jam. Like, picture that in your mind's eye, if you can. But then you go through a couple of quests, and there's this weird scene where you get drunk with him in a bathtub, and he sends you out to pick flowers while you're absolutely smashed. And it, like, really turns the character. Later on, still a bit of a piece of shit. But when you get into this game, he's like a super fish out of water. He's not able to lean on his nobility. People don't give a shit who he is. And he's doing things that he would get away with in Retire, the first game, but doesn't work in Trotsky. And so he just does stuff that's like so insane because he thinks he will always be able to get out of trouble, or just he's a nobility, so no one will be able to beat the shit out of him. Like,
which means your entire experience with him is just him constantly throwing tantrums. Like he's just like he's like a parody of like a jock character from like an 80s, not a jock character, sorry, like the rich kids in like a frat movie, and like John Belushi should be like pulling pranks on. He should have a cardigan wrapped around his neck and go, when my father hears about this.
Yeah,
he does. He definitely
is exactly what he's like, honestly.
or like a character from almost like Veronica Mars, or even there's like a bit of Star-Lord in there as well. But I think that like the issue we keep kind of like go back to is like this so much feels like acts 2 and 3 of the story that is in the first game in such a weird way that it almost makes me reticent to recommend it. Like I quite like this game, but it's one of those things of like, oh, should I start with this one? I'm like, absolutely not. Like you should definitely play the first one.
It gives you flashbacks, but they don't really tell you what the story of the first game was.
Yeah. And also the first game, to be like from a consumer value perspective, it's a much cheaper way to find out whether you can fuck with this. Like,
yeah, absolutely. But I do think like they did like they like the experience of the second game is better. Like mechanically, the second game is better. Like the way that fighting works makes more sense. In the first game, it's very dreary and you can just rely on master strikes and it's 100% fine. In this, it's actually like a little bit of like hit and miss. Like, you actually need to make smart decisions in battle, and it's not just relying on combos or anything like that to get through. The perk system has been drastically increased to the way that there are actually a lot of options. And I think I didn't actually max out any of the skills because by the time I got to 50 hours, I'm like, oh, I've really got to hustle here. And then I just mainlined the story after doing almost everything in the first area. I didn't complete any of my skills, but I think, Fergus, you said it went up to level 30?
Yeah, 30. I
Possibly?
maxed out two or three of them. I think I kept that at 30.
Yeah.
Off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
and it just gives you so many options for perks, which is
Yeah, I
very
do think
cool.
there's so many like quality of life stuff like that. Like even the fact that you can quick equip a torch, which sounds like so
Holy
trivial, but
shit.
oh my god, you have to
Yes.
fully open your inventory to turn on a torch every time. So like I would say the things that were annoying about the first game are about 20% less annoying in this one, and the things that were good about the first game are about 20% better.
Yeah, that's actually a really fair way to look at it.
Yeah.
One of the things I found super interesting is that you can equip 3 sets of gear, which is massive.
I discovered this way too late. It was tragic.
God, I know. The other part of this that I hated is you can't save the sets. So what I generally did was I had a nice heavy set of armor that I would use in my day-to-day for combat, and then I had an extremely light set of armor that had extremely low conspicuousness that I would use for my thieving when I needed to. Henry is a good boy, and I will reiterate that. And then finally I had a noble set of gear that I relied upon. What this game does, though, is one of the most annoying things I have ever seen, where sometimes your character will just need another set of gear and it'll just wipe your whatever set you're using. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Please, God.
Also, it expects you to carry gear for different situations, and unless you really put points into it, you can't carry all that much stuff because heavy armor is heavy.
So heavy. Yeah.
Not with all the bread I'm carrying, certainly.
Actually, this is for you, Jam. How did you find the save system? Because it is super contentious and it's better in this game, but I know a lot of people that hate it.
I think it is the most ludicrously over-designed save system ever, and it's completely arbitrary and pointless when you can just go save and exit anyway at any time. Like, why have save potions? Why have owned beds? Why have all this nonsense when it lets you save and quit?
Yep.
Like, all I do is save and quit and reopen the game in Steam. Like, why would I bother with Savior Schnaps, any of that nonsense?
I think it's almost like the kind of thing if they did another one, you would see it like cordoned off into like an Iron Man mode, like in XCOM, because it's obviously there for sickos. It's a sickos like who would prefer to play it that way. Whereas most people are like, oh yeah, that's neat. I will save and exit, like, and essentially save scum, right? Like,
so in the first game, you didn't have save and exit when it launched. Save and exit did come later, but it's only one save, and when you reload, it wipes it. So in the second game, you have the ability to actually do those save and exits, and it is actually a proper save, but it also saves during quests, which is nice, and it saves whenever you sleep at a bed that isn't owned by someone else, which is also kind of nice. I still relied upon the Savior Schnapps for a few reasons. Number one, I wanted a reason to level up my drinking, which is useless until it's super needed. It's a very useless skill, but when you absolutely need it for a quest, you're like, oh god, I'm glad I leveled this up. And the other part of it is I needed an excuse to level up my herbalism.
Also, funny thing about that the one time on a quest that I had to get drunk for the quest, it made me wander off into the woods, which then landed me into an area where another quest I also had an event trigger, so I had to do a big fight in the pitch black, very drunk. And I broke both quests simultaneously. Because this game just allows that crap to happen.
Yeah, it really does.
Interesting, kind of funny. I don't think that's good game design.
Yeah, it is definitely a game for, like I said, it's definitely a game for sickos. Like, I love this game because I love those complicated mechanics. I love the weirdness around it. Like, I saw... Yeah, go
I
on.
love this stuff too. Like, I love a Focus Home interactive game. There's a reason Focus Home interactive games aren't given $100 million budgets and 6 years to be made. because they're full of a lot of very interesting, but ultimately really goddamn fucking bad ideas and just stupid design decisions.
Look,
Yeah.
that is super true. I won't deny that, like, if like this game is definitely going to have a lot of people bounce off it. This is not a game
God,
that is
yeah.
easily going to
Yeah.
break into the
Yeah.
mainstream because it is unrelenting. It is absolutely ludicrous in the way it does things.
I mean, in defense of this game completely doubling down on some of the stuff that's annoying in the first one, like it did like sell 8 million copies, which is it's not
Wait, the first game
you know,
sold
a
8
tiny,
million?
yeah, like I can imagine if it's so like a game like this, which is so divisive, selling that many copies is probably a pretty strong like signal of confidence to be like, you know what, let him go wild.
How
And
many
that has
people stuck with it though?
Yeah.
no, yeah,
I'd actually
I
be
can't answer
super
that,
interested
but
in looking at Steam
Yeah.
and seeing how many got
Mm.
like more than the first achievement.
Mm.
But I mean that's going to happen for a lot of games, and this game
It's a great
is
game.
yeah, this game is so long. Holy crap! Like I said that like I got almost 50 hours in and I hadn't started the main scenario yet, so
Oh,
I
yeah.
did that, and then just mainlining it, it still took me another around 50 hours just to get through the story. That's so freaking long.
Yeah, I would say it's like Elden Ring / The Witcher 3 long, where you're like, Jesus Christ, we could have done some cuts here.
Yeah.
Like, kind of thing.
Well, I tried
Yeah.
to. Here's the thing: like after that first area, I tried to mainline the main story because you know there are other things to play. The clock's ticking, that kind of stuff. Embargo's coming up, and I still was hitting hard difficulty walls. And I hit a particularly hard difficulty wall, which I still can't fathom how it's meant to be possible to get through because this came after many, many, many hours. There is a point where it suddenly tells you, like, the open world will be closed off for a while, finish up your
Yep.
business before you progress. So I'm like, okay, I've done basically every side quest. I've gone through, like, the whole map, just randomly exploring. I feel like my gear is pretty good. I've got a really powerful sword that seems to be, like, kind of important. So I feel like this is the weapon to wield. All signs point to, like, I'm good. It's letting me progress. I consciously tried to over level a bit because so many mechanics were annoying me. And then about 7-8 hours later of like all that linear narrowed off content, it threw me into a fight that I tried 30 or 40 times and could not do. And I haven't finished the game because I still cannot get through that fight. There are no signs or like structural indications of like it shouldn't have put me down that path hours and hours earlier. Like I still my mind is still blown here that like it let me like explore so much of the world and do what I thought was kind of everything, and then get me stuck. Like again, I don't think that's good design. I
Yeah.
don't think it's a well-designed game. I've had fun with bits of it. I just don't think it's a well-designed game on micro or macro levels.
I would not pitch it as well designed. I would pitch it as most designed.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
hideous.
that's a really good way to
design.
look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very much the sandboxy nature of it, though. But I 100% agree with you. Like, I didn't have trouble with the part you were talking about, but I had problems with other parts where the game forces you into extremely difficult battles that it does not prepare you for. The weird thing about this game is that there is like no way to tell how strong you are. Like sometimes you can get a nice weapon and that'll make all the difference. Sometimes you'll get nice armor and it'll just make battles run easier. A lot of the times it's just related to skill, and like 95% of the time it is down to luck. Like sometimes you are just either in a good position or you're relying on a lot of strategy that you knew ahead of time to be able to like really work around the enemies and make things work out. Like no part of this did I feel, oh, I'm super strong, I can take down tons of enemies. There were times I took down like 3 or 4 enemies at a time, but it was always due to luck more than anything else. And I think that's like a really interesting part of the game in a completely horrifying way. Fergus, I think you're right. This is definitely the most designed game. Like there is systems here. I don't know why they exist or why they needed to exist.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff where you're just like, why did you do this? But some of it is charming. Like I love that you can go up to like a Christian shrine and just have Henry do a fully voice acted prayer for a couple of minutes and get a buff out of it. And if you do anything to interrupt him praying, you have to start over, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's like that's so funny that they put that in there. But I will say on the
that's funny and interesting.
Yeah.
But then, why does it make you blacksmith horseshoes in a way where you have to move both the actual horseshoe and your hammer, and it's so easy to constantly miss, and you have to tap all the way around the horseshoe shape and then flip it and then back again, and you have to do that for 5 full goddamn minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, the horseshoes be crazy. I have no defense for the horseshoes. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, horseshoes are absolutely ridiculous. I kind of wish it was like, I don't know, a crosshair or something where Henry's aiming.
Right.
Because you miss the horseshoe so many times because it's so small. Like, doing bigger weapons didn't have a problem. I could do axe heads, I can do swords all day long, mostly, except when you find a very arbitrary, I've almost fucked this up, when he's like hitting good sparks the entire way through, but
even then, why do you need to spend 10 minutes making a sword? Why can't it be 2?
Look, that's just... there's not a defense for it other than that's Kingdom Come, I guess.
I don't know. I found it very zen. At a certain point, I was like, "This is great. I'm just gonna hang out here, make a nice sword."
Yeah, I feel the same about herbalism.
They really grew on me. Not herbalism. Sorry, I don't mess with alchemy. But the
alchemy is infuriating. It's impossible.
I love herbalism.
I will simply buy my potions like a modern man.
Well, the thing is, the systems that I don't know why they added was the spoiling of herbs. Like, why did you do this? Well, you didn't have to. You did, and even if you did spoil them, why did you put in a system to dry them? Like, what is it? Who is this for? I felt the same about food. Like, you're running around and you're just like, I'm just going to nip into this smokehouse and just smoke some pork in a stranger's house for a moment.
Oh.
But that's all stuff too. Like NPCs will so often get intensely narky if you step in the wrong area of the grounds of their place. But you can just use their smokehouse and their drying rack, and smoking meat is instantaneous. Yeah. But it's where they've chosen to draw the lines with their devotion to realism being so arbitrary that's driving me insane.
The one thing that happened that I was very annoyed about where they drew the line was in relation to quests. Sometimes it'll go, hey, that person's in that area somewhere, go and find them. And sometimes it's like, I have a GPS and an air tag on that person, and I know exactly where they're going to be for the next 10 hours.
And sometimes it'll tag the location to go, and sometimes it won't. And sometimes your quest log will update with information, and sometimes it won't.
Yep. It's extremely confusing the way they've designed quests. I am a bit of a sicko, so I would like a lot of the quests to be redesigned to say, hey, that person's at that town, go and find them. And
sorry, you go.
I was just saying, and sometimes too, a character will say, okay, we'll meet up later. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to spend the next 7 in-game days doing my own stuff and get back to this. And sometimes that breaks a quest. Sometimes it doesn't. Everything is so inconsistent.
Did either of you spend much time in the quest log?
Yeah.
I found usually if I got stuck, there was some sort of critical detail in the text there. But also sometimes it would bug out and would be weird. That also happened. Yeah.
I just didn't like the part where it's pointed directly to a person, but a little bit later it's the same thing will be, hey, that person will be around in that town at some stage.
At night.
Yeah, it's very strange where they draw the line with these things.
How do you go about riddles? How do you feel about a riddle?
I love a riddle.
Pro or anti-riddle? I could have done with less riddles.
I only ran into the riddle man a couple of times, and
no, the riddle guy is good. It's when there's a quest that's here's this riddle. And
yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, finding the way into one of the castles. It's hey, if you go here and look for this, and then follow that, and then look for that, and then
Uh,
but it
I
barely
spent
tells you
fo-
where to do in the
I
area.
spent 40 minutes traipsing through the jungle, just being like,
Holy
where
shit!
is this?
Yeah,
Where is this landmark they want me to find?
yeah. The first one was what got me. It's like, go
Yeah.
through these rocks and look for this on the ground, and I'm like, I honestly spent about half an hour running around trying to find where that fucking cross was, and it was
Oh,
awful.
and none of the maps or treasure maps or anything you found, I've even I'm just like,
Yeah.
no, this is impossible. This is not happening.
Okay,
Mm.
that I will talk about because I love cryptocartography. I love fake maps in games. These were impenetrable. I couldn't solve a fucking one of them.
But you know what game did all of this stuff? Like mechanical systems that are like embody like your protagonist struggles, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Maps, all this bullshit. Red Dead Redemption 2. And
Yeah.
you know what it did geniusly? It walked the line right up to, oh, Arthur is struggling with this.
Mm.
Like hunting, weapon maintenance, all this stuff. Like, it's a little bit fiddly. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt. But it's over in 15 seconds, and it's not that hard or that complex.
Yeah.
I don't know
100% agree with
why.
you.
I don't know why you designed beyond that point. Because
Yeah,
even
I
that,
kind of,
even Red Dead 2 was really contentious with that stuff.
yeah.
People hated it.
To be honest, I love Red Dead. I think you're 100% right. Like, Red Dead worked out these systems, it designed them generally quite well. Even the, like, looking for fucking orchids in the jungle, it was kind
Yeah.
of fine because you kind of knew where they grew and you kind of had an idea. And when you got stuck, there would always be Arthur like going, oh yeah, maybe I should look at this. Henry, he's not helping you at all. If you can't work out a map, sucks to be you.
Yeah.
I have not played Red Dead 2, but I was curious when I was playing this how similarly it sort of pulled in that direction. So that's interesting to hear.
Yeah. The one
Yeah.
thing that I did love that they added, that wasn't in the first game, was actual rough locations of herbs. Like, I love herbalism, so I love going around and finding things. They kind of tell you, hey, belladonna, it'll grow in, copses in the forest or places where it's very damp. First game, doesn't help you like that at all. In fact, the herbs in the first game are so hard to tell apart from the normal ground most of the time that even in this game, they're like, you can kind of tell where something is ahead of time. Like, if you have to go look for poppy, you kind of can see it from a decent trek away. I'd use a mod in the first game to make them more visible because it was so impenetrable for me. How did you feel about I know we talked about the actual way the blacksmithing worked, but how did you feel about, like, smithing your own weapons, like collecting all those weapon parts and bringing them together?
I felt it was really tedious and not worth it until we got to the late game, and then I was like, "This is great! This is just great! I'm gonna go find these things. I'm gonna make the sword even better." Also, they had again, there's so many little weird encounters. Like, I remember there's one little random side quest where I met another blacksmith, and he's like, "Oh, you're a blacksmith as well? Let's see if you're better than my apprentice." And then I go and have a blacksmithing competition with this guy, and then he goes, "Wow, you're way better than my apprentice." And turns to the apprentice and goes, "You're fired. Go away." I'm like, I ruined this guy's life by being your blessing. And it's like, why is this a quest?
Yeah, see, I did that
Yeah.
exact same quest, and I chose to turn the other cheek and kind of say, "Oh, you'll get better." And then the blacksmith wanted the apprentice and me to fight with our weapons, and I just beat the shit out of this apprentice.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've done something awful to this guy because I beat him in blacksmithing, and I just beat the shit out of him in a fight.
Ended his
He's
whole
having a
career
day.
right there. Yeah. There's so much random stuff like that. Like, there was one where it's like a random person was selling a horse named Mark, and you can just ask, why is the horse named Mark? They're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So many things. You're like, why is this here? Which is,
Yeah.
I guess that's really the whole story of this game. Is you're going, why is this here? But
Yeah,
brackets, sometimes good, sometimes bad.
There's actually some really interesting skill checks that happen quite late in the game. Speech checks where you can do the right thing. Like, in one, I was showing last rites for someone, or I was doing a prayer for someone's dead brother, and the person is saying the prayer aloud. He can't read. He is not religious by nature. Like, he doesn't have any clergy background or anything. So he kind of tries to say the Latin phrases, completely botches it, and then you can you can correct him and
actually,
say the properly things, and the dude, that is the right thing to do because you are saying like what is actually meant to be said. The dude fucking hates you for it. He hates you for it. And like you get completely locked out of like another map which I couldn't solve, so it wasn't worth it. But you get completely locked out of his gear if you kind of be an asshole politely and do the right thing, because that's not the right thing for the situation. And like some of those are like super arbitrary, but like I found a lot of the times, even though I could make a skill check or make a certain check, it wasn't the right thing to do. And I think that's such an interesting mechanic.
Yeah.
But also horrible in arbitrariness.
But I do like choice and consequence, like in a role playing game. Like there's a very clear distinction between like the way like Bethesda make a Fallout between and how Obsidian made a Fallout, whereas like Bethesda had the whole idea of like the player is free to do everything, become master of all guilds, have every single weapon, whereas Obsidian is like no, you make choices about who you want to align with, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And neither school is invalid. Like people prefer different things. I don't think a role playing game is very interesting unless there's actually like ramifications for your actions. But yeah, so it's cool to hear that there are like odd ways that you can like fuck things up by doing things that you're kind of prompted to do. I actually think like that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I think the way that the game handles choice in like conversations is actually like it's hard to tell how well it is used across the board because there's just so much dialogue in the game. But it's like it will give you multiple dialogue choices which will each have different skill checks, and then those skill checks are indexed against how likely that approach or that argument is to work based on this person. And it's like that's so interesting they've thought this like extra step and extra dimension into the dialogue tree process, but also it's so it's like a black box almost. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, when I was thinking about, you mentioned Red Dead before. Like, Red Dead has a like system around meeting random strangers on the street, and a lot of them have really interesting things to do. The amount of interesting things that happened while I was traveling in Kingdom Come is mind-boggling. Like one time, I was helping a bandit who had an arrow in his head. And I think his name's Arrowhead, but I can't remember exactly. And he's like, "Hey, can you help me lug off this grain?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, no worries." And as you're walking through the woods with this guy carrying grain, he's like, "Oh yeah, we just stole this bunch of grain, and thanks for helping me out." And you're asking about the arrow in his head, and he's like, "Yeah, don't remove it. It makes me super lucky." As you end up like making your way into this bandits camp. Normally they would all attack you on sight, but they're super cool with you. You sit down and you have a chat with them while they're like doing these chores, and it is so confusing that it is like such a weird thing that happened. And there was tons of those where like people are just doing random shit in the street that is so weird.
I mean, so much of what I found was just like random bandit encounters of them mugging people, on forest roads and that kind of stuff. And I started trying to do the right thing and trying to get the experience of like, intervening and helping, but every single time they just murder the fuck out of me. So I stopped.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair.
It's a dangerous world. It's a dangerous world out there.
It's so dangerous. Yeah. A lot of times, spoilers, it's all wolves. Everyone's a wolf.
Oh yeah,
there are wolves everywhere. They're horrifying. I don't know what's happening in the Trotsky region, but down in Ratai we didn't have those issues. One of the quests kind of world defense that happened in the first area, I was helping this guy that was getting mugged by bandits. I killed the bandits, and he was telling me about how unlucky his life has been.
Oh my gosh, this guy. Yes.
He went to steal a horse. Oh, sorry, he went to buy a horse, and a day later he paid a dude to like rent it. And then he went into the woods and it died. And so he had to pay for the horse, and then his wife left him. And like all of this bad shit has happened in his life. You find out he's called Lucky. Like later on, in a completely different event, I find him again getting about to get torn to shreds by wolves. I didn't actually see the end of it because I didn't hang around the first area enough. But God, I love Lucky so much.
I love the dialogue tree for that encounter where you're just like, well, it can't be that bad. And you just like keep going one layer deep, and then by the end you're like, all right, you might be cursed. You know what? You might be on something.
Yeah, there's some very fun stuff
Yeah,
that happens.
I think one of the things that I really like generally about this game is that it feels like a kind of sequel that is rarer and rarer, where it feels like they just went, the bones of this first game people like. We will fix some stuff, we will do some renovations, but in the advantage of not having to start from scratch is we can make so much stuff, and not all of it needs to be like that core main quest. We can just fill out the world with so much cool stuff, and there's arguably too much stuff, in fairness.
There's so
But
much stuff.
it's
Holy
just one of
shit.
those things. It's one of those things where it's like, wow, they like. I feel like I do not encounter so many weird, like one-off encounters or random side quests now, because everything feels so polished and integrated in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Especially in modern open world stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of feels very retro to me, or it just reminds me of like weird, ambitious, kind of uneven, janky games that
Yeah,
I
like
played
these
when
are
I
the
was in high
ones that
school. Yeah.
really work for me because
Mm.
I don't play a lot of AAA games, and I find that the games I'm most interested in aren't necessarily good, but they do something interesting. And I'm like, for
Oh,
all
I
of
love
these,
I love an Ernest B game.
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love
Like it
a bunch of
tried
game that
something, it didn't make
tries.
it, but it tried.
Yeah.
Um, there's just so many weird things in this game. I adore it, but it feels almost like an RPG underdog in a very strange way. Yeah. What was the other system that I was like, oh,
Oh,
I love the
crime.
change. Yeah, they check. God, why did they put so much work into crime? It is so strange. I don't know how much trouble you got into, Jam. Obviously,
Uh,
Henry,
I,
call me
I
good Christian
I
boy.
broke a couple of quests because in order to talk to the quest giver, I realized I was trespassing in their place, and then after hours and hours of doing their quest chain, I'd finally get
Mm.
back there, and they just wouldn't talk to me. They'd acknowledge
Oh,
me, but they wouldn't talk to me.
oh. Um. Uh. Maybe I don't know. My immediate troubleshooting brain is like, you could go do a pilgrimage and redeem your reputation. Maybe that resets the world state, like the Pope does in
I
Elden Ring.
never
But
did
But
that's
that.
yeah,
does it work like that? There's so many systems where it's like blah blah
yeah.
blah. This can do this, but what does
Oh
that
Yeah.
yeah,
actually mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's how it works. I'm pretty sure. I never did the pilgrimage, but I imagine
Oh, I
just
didn't.
due to the cost, it
What's
was so expensive for me. It was like I think it was like 1,800 groschen, and I'm like, to walk across the world, you must be out of your goddamn mind. I'm not doing that.
um, gosh, there's so much stuff there. The
Yeah,
other crime related thing I wanted to ask about was, did you get into the gambling minigame?
I love the gambling minigame. I don't know why they put in the like tokens, but
Mm,
I love the gambling.
I'm so
mm,
bad at it. I don't hate it, but it's not my favorite, little
mm.
mini game distraction.
I
Again,
never
in the spirit
lost.
of how over designed it is, I love how deep you can get into cheating at it. And also I like that you can just find rigged dice off people's bodies and be like,
Yep.
yes,
Mm.
yes, I will
Yeah,
roll
I kind
unders.
of wish those rigged dice kind of gave you an idea of what they did. Like
Mm,
I got two out of the three Lucifer dice, and I was super excited about it. I can't tell you what those Lucifer dice do. I know
Oh
that you're
yeah,
not meant
no.
to use them
yeah.
if you don't have all three, but like a
Mm,
lot of them, you're like, oh, this is his lucky die, and you're like, what does fucking lucky mean? Does it always roll a six? Because that's super bad.
mm,
Like it just doesn't explain anything.
mm,
The 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 whole token system they brought into the game was really weird. I don't know why they did it.
It
I'm
is
not
weird.
against it, but it's so weird. Like a lot of
mm.
times I didn't earn any. A lot of times I just stole them off dead bodies. Where I'm like, oh cool, I've got one of these. Do I lose this if I lose the gamble? How does it work with those?
Mm.
That's the thing. It's
Um,
it's that's another example too of just like everything is so systems heavy and it's frequently not great at actually explaining any of the systems. And I do think there's going to be a certain terminally online weirdo dipshit contingent who are going to be like, but that's the fun, baby. Kingdom Come. That's how it is.
I'm in
Again, I
this
just
game and I
don't
don't
think
like
it's
it.
good design. Yeah.
Look, I'm not. I think you're right. I think there is some very badly designed. One thing that you mentioned on the Discord when we were talking prior that I thought was super interesting, Jam. You said that you were talking to people to try and find out how the perks work. This is the game where I look at it and go, "Oh wow, they've actually explained what these perks do." So I'm super interested in what your experience with the perk system was.
The perk system. I mean, it's fine as a system. I think a lot of the perks I don't quite see the points in because a lot of them are hyper situational.
Yep.
Yeah, it's even then, it's like the choices they made and what perk options they are were like just really odd a lot of the time.
Yeah, I actually honestly wish that there was more perks still because I want there to be more replayability by making a more interesting or specialized build where in reality, as you get to the top of those perk trees, you kind of can buy all the ones you really want and then you just kind of get a few that you're like, it
It's also
doesn't hurt.
such a grind to level any skill to unlock perks that like especially combat perks. I've been using a longsword or just swords in
Mm,
general for pretty much the whole game, and I'd love to try wielding a warhammer, but I don't want to just start over from scratch combat wise.
that is completely fair. So the interesting thing here is that they changed up the way vendors do skills. So in the previous game, if someone was good at a skill, they were good all the way up to master, which is level 20. In
Skill
this,
training for vendors is also horrifically expensive.
it's extremely expensive. Like holy shit! But I mean, like again, this is like one of those weird lines they've drawn in realism. Like you would pay a lot to learn from a master in ancient Bohemia. Each kind of vendor in this, or each skill person has the level of skill they're good to. Like a skilled person might be able to teach you, but they might be like only an amateur, and like they can train you up to level 5, and then after that, you're like, I'd go work it out on your own. I thought that was interesting, but also horrible because until you get to like the second area, and even late in the second area, you'll never find a master vendor. Like, there's never someone that's going to be able to teach you all the way up. Yeah, I thought that was really, really strange. Not bad per se, because the leveling of the perks, leveling of your skills wasn't awful for me. Like they have compressed a few skills into one skill in this, like pickpocketing and locksmithing used to be different. Lockpicking used to be different skills in Kingdom Come, and now it's just thievery. And that means as you level up one, it levels up both, and that's so much better.
Well, here's the
To
thing
let
too. Locksmithing. So, just quick sidebar for a second. I thought I was convinced locksmithing literally didn't work. Like, literally didn't work for the first like dozen hours of the game, because I was playing on Steam Deck. And on
Oh,
Steam Deck, it's probably been fixed now, like at post launch, like when this will be live. But it basically didn't work. It
mm,
was it was like having the sensitivity of your sticks like miles high. So the second you
yeah.
touch it a little bit, the sweet spot would go weep, and you couldn't do the dual stick activity.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Other
there are
than
a
that,
lot
the
of
game
people
runs
that.
great on Steam Deck.
I mean, that's good. It's actually a
Yeah.
surprise, but it's good because
But there's so much like that too, where it's like if you're playing on controller for some of the design of these systems versus mouse and keyboard versus
yeah.
Steam Deck, you're gonna have wildly different and often more challenging experiences.
So I can talk
Yeah.
about the first game here. The keyboard and mouse in the first game was by far the best way to do lockpicking because it was so much easier to keep on that sweet spot. It was so much easier to do. There are tons of people that bounced off lockpicking in the first game to the stage that later on they had to change lockpicking and add a simplified mode,
Right.
which was kind of what we see in this one, to make it easier for people. It is lockpicking is by far the skill where you see the most benefit because at the start you're like, I can't open a very easy lock. This is impenetrable. And then later on you're like, oh, like very hard, no problem. Let's just and you're like done in like 10 seconds. It's
Why would I
so
pay for
strange.
things?
Pretty
I
much.
mean, yeah.
I will jump in there and say that as someone who reviewed this on PS5, the early levels of lockpicking, miserable,
Yep.
miserable. But once I had good
Horrible.
thievery, being able to just be like, oh yeah, hard lock, easy, and just like crushing it. Like the perks for lockpicking, especially, and just leveling that skill up, the difference is huge.
But
Yeah,
again, too,
actually,
it teaches you the basics of this kind of stuff on the core story path from memory.
it does, yeah.
But also, there's a whole side quest chain that's basically Crime 101. And it's miserable. It's horrible to try to do the first step style because you're so bad at things, and it doesn't explain them especially well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like the game has, I think it has the expectation that you will sit there and like read all the skill guides and everything like that. Like I think for like even gambling, there's like 5 pages, and I'm like, I don't want to read this. I kind of just want to like.
I can't absorb it even when I try. It's
Yeah.
overloading with systemic information.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Sorry, one thing I did want to re-clarify. Thieving skill is made up of lock picking and pickpocketing. In the first game, pickpocketing is its own skill, and leveling it is so much worse than lock picking because you just kind of have to knock people out and then pickpocket them while they're knocked out, and it's awful. It's truly awful. I actually really liked the pickpocketing in this. I thought it was more fun. It's not inherently super duper different, but like some of the skills make it a lot better. It actually took me a while. I don't know if it actually says this in game, but like when you're trying to pickpocket someone, I didn't realize that like the timer going red meant they're about to catch you out. I don't know if it said that, but I when I worked it out, I'm like, oh, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
The haptics on that for the PS5 are really good, I will say. As you're
they?
as you're building up the timer for the pickpocket, the control starts to like vibrate, so you kind of like know when you want to kind of
Oh, that is super good.
roll the dice.
Yeah. What did each of you play it on? So, Fergus, you were PS5. What about you, Jam? Oh, Steam Deck. Right. Sorry. I do listen. I promise.
PC, but heavily Steam Deck. Got to say, like it runs well on PC. It actually runs. They didn't say up front that it was gonna run on Steam Deck. I just always try. Runs great. It's like anything like low to like I put a few things on medium. It's consistently 40 to 45 frames per second. People will gripe about that, but the game looks great on a handheld on the Steam Deck screen. I've got the OLED and it looks really nice. But yeah, it's perfectly playable. It's as a game to play on Steam Deck where you can just hit pause and put it down and come back to things. That's been my preferred way to play. Not that I really prefer to playing this game at all, but still. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. How was it on PS5, Fergus?
It was pretty good. Yeah. I am a performance mode person, not a fidelity mode person. It looks nicer in the fidelity mode, but please, I want 60 frames. And so it ran really, really smooth. I will say towards the last of the game, I reached certain points where I was like, "Ooh, this has not been optimized." I don't know. Did you ever have the weird lighting glitch where it almost feels like there's like
yes,
like
God,
strobe lighting? Yeah,
the shadows freak out as well.
And like to be clear, this is significantly more technically clean launch than the first game. But definitely in line with that first game, and this subgenre in general can be very janky and lots of random stuff can happen, like broken quest chains, random graphics glitches, weird physics stuff. Yeah.
For a game of this type, it is launching in an impressive state, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Honestly, like I saw the term Eurojank being thrown around in the Discord.
That's disrespectful to Eurojank.
Yeah, like there are some truly horrendous things that happen in other games I have played. Like this game actually, like even in comparison to like Skyrim, Fallout, this runs really well. Like I had a couple of technical issues where like things failed that weren't meant to, or I had like 2 crashed desktops. But other than that, it was super duper clean. I'm actually astounded because I think the first game launched. To put this into perspective, the first game launched awfully, and a lot of the systems weren't optimized as well. Like, so Jam, your experience with this game, make it like at least 50% worse, and that's how the first game launched. It was rough times out there.
Okay,
it was bleak. But I'm
on the technical side, have either of you played the Stalker 2? How does it? Because I haven't gone to it yet. How does it compare to that in terms of kind of like if you were to?
This runs a lot better. Stalker 2 is an amazing game. I love Stalker. I've always loved the Stalker series. Um, but it is super duper broken. Features were just missing from the game. A lot of things didn't work or worked badly. Quests changed, weren't 100% finished or didn't work. Yeah, in comparison to this is like buttery smooth. Awesome all the way around, honestly. Yeah, it's a weird one. Okay, we've been talking for a while. Is there any other points I missed that other people want to talk about?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think it would be remiss to sort of not talk about is the weird relationship this game has with the idea of historical accuracy.
Holy shit! Yeah,
Because that is the center of its whole design, its whole thing, right?
yeah,
yeah, and all the marketing and all the pitch of it and everything
Yeah.
is this idea of like this is history, and there's so many interest. There's one of the things that I'm a history person, but this is not I'm not a specifically Bohemia history person, but there's so many interesting sort of historical angles to this game in terms of the world, like the place it depicts, the time it depicts, the perspective it depicts, the fact that like Czech this is kind of like a national historical thing for Czech. So it's like there's so much interesting stuff there, and then once you drill down to the details, you obviously find that history is like super contested, and any attempt to represent the past is like a statement on what that past was and what was important and what wasn't, and whose story is worth telling, and all of that juicy stuff. And unfortunately, there are no good. There are no. It's a very hard question to deal with, and I don't think this game is rigorous enough, I guess, to provide satisfactory answers to that question, because it's about the fantasy of history more than anything else. Like this is Dungeons and No Dragons is the original pitch, and I think that's much truer than Eurosim.
I think that this game when they say, "Oh, this is like super close to history," none of the events, like a lot of the events that happened, they happened. Like but they were all in completely different orders, different years, different times, that sort of thing. I look at this game being true to history, and the only part of it I'm interested in is like the infrastructure and the towns. Those are the things that I think are closer to history. So what I did when I first loaded up this game, just for a lark, because I'm a psychopath, is I loaded up Google Maps. And I went to the area, and I kind of had a look at what the area is like, what the towns looked like, where they are on the map. And like when I loaded into the second area, I went, oh, okay, I'm at this town. And I went to Google Maps again, and I looked at it and went, oh, that means this big town is over there. And I thought that was a really cool way of doing it. Like I've never had that experience of like something being relatively close geographically to how it is, which I think is super interesting.
The way the world is scaled feels very evocative and kind of like if nothing else, the scale of it feels kind of real in a way.
I really did.
What's your take on history?
Yeah. Look, again, with like the guiding principle for so much of this being accuracy and realism, like in terms of like historical and all this kind of stuff, it's like that does not a good idea make, a good game make, a good anything so much of the time. Like, but again, too, it's just it's the constant arbitrary choice in what is the mark in this given situation, like whether it's a system design or whether it's like representation of a people or a event or whatever. I mean, there is some representation stuff in this game that like we could talk about, because dear lord, it's not good. It's there are going to be takes. There is going to be a shit show over some of this stuff.
Well, arguably, there already is.
Yeah, yeah. So I really don't want to touch on this, but it's like super important to the discussion. So
I mean, I can talk about it, but like if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I don't like touching on this stuff, but like the head of the team
is the creative director.
Warhorse. Yep, creative director. Thank you. I'm very bad at people. has come out as very much anti-social justice, anti-left, anti-ableism, that sort of thing. He has worn some super egregious shirts. He's worn it on his sleeve.
And this was 10. It came out about this 10 years ago when the first game came out, and now he's
this
just
was
stuck with
not
it.
an unknown quantity. It was news to me when I looked it up just after playing up this game, because I did not know. And in this game, there is a few things that people are mad about. The most ironic thing about all of this is that the people saying they're mad about this shit, they don't fucking understand it in the slightest. They haven't played the game. They don't understand the context. They don't know how
People
it works.
don't play the games they're mad about ever. We know this.
That's exactly when I play games when I'm mad about them. I'm like, this
Now you're onto
fucking
something.
annoying the shit out of me. I'm fucking gonna play this so I understand.
Yeah.
There are a few things in this game that I think were an interesting choice. I'm not going to say they're bad choices. I actually think they're actually super cool choices
I think
for
some are
some
bad
of
choices.
them. For
Some of them are, in fact,
I am
bad
not dying on
choices.
that
The
hill.
yikes choices.
In the very first area, if you follow one of the quest lines, you come across a hermit living in the woods who is openly gay. I thought this was really interesting. Henry, I am very understanding of these things, or at least I try to be, as much as a person of my personage is going to be. So you have the way to say to him of like, hey, that's cool, or that's not good, that's very anti-religious. And I am the guy that went, well, Henry is a heavily religious guy. It's 1403 in Bohemia, and he didn't like it. And the dude's like, that's fine. That's why I'm living out here. People still need to come to me to get herbs, so, like, that's the cross I have to bear. And I thought that was like, oh, that's really interesting. That's, like, a really interesting way to do this. Like, there are going to be, and spoilers to everyone out there, there are going to be people, regardless of what year it is, that are gay. That's okay. It might not be okay in the way that society sees them, and in 1400, it's a bad time, but they exist. I think the game was interesting to touch upon it. There is also moments later on in the game where Henry can be gay and or bi or whatever he wants, but
He can literally be gay and do crimes.
yeah, absolutely. And he's out there living his best life. People on the internet are incredibly mad about this and saying, oh, they've rewritten Henry. I can't believe they would do this to take over everything that happened in the first game.
Not
I mean,
Henry, that beloved icon of gaming canon.
Yeah. But I mean, the other part of it is, like, people are super mad about them forcing it down at their throats. It just ain't fucking true.
It's a role-playing game. You control the buttons you press.
Yeah.
God, I love that Doomidage. I love that exists. Like, I looked at it, I looked at the option and went, huh, that's actually super interesting. How does Henry feel about this? And I had to actually stop and think, wow, I've done a lot of stuff with this person. Did that change the way Henry acted? Did that make Henry have romantic feelings about that person? And in my eyes, I said no, because Henry is devoted to his Teresa back at the mill in Ratai in the first game. But I think it's super fucking cool that it exists as an option. It's not like forcing anything down anyone's throat. It's a fucking option.
It's almost like you were role-playing in a role-playing game.
Shocking! What a world we live in.
For reference, my Henry was not loyal to Teresa. We were having a good time.
You monster!
Visiting all the bathhouses.
Saved you.
Oh,
You
well, the buff you
ungrateful
get from the
swine.
bathhouses is amazing. Like, it's just better stats all the time. Worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that on the controversy stuff, I think for me, there's like two layers. A, the creative director needs to touch grass. He needs to stop posting desperately, because like he posted very bad stuff 10 years ago, and he has continued to post dumb shit in more recent years as well. So if he could stop posting, that would be great. But if I can put that to the side for a second,
Yes.
I think it is interesting that the first game was criticized a lot for having sort of more simple representations of the kind of flattened races within this time period and cultures in this time period. And this game attempts to not flatten them and has uneven mixed success. And I do like that they at least made an attempt, I guess. It's very messy, and some of it is quite bad. But I do I feel like it is somewhat nice to see them make an attempt, it go bad, then have this come out and people be like, well, you didn't put a single black person in the game, and have the exact same conversation we had 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think oh god, so
marginal
late in the game,
I know.
late in the game, late in the game,
yeah,
you meet a person in one of the camps that is black. He is a doctor, or at least, practices medicine. He is there helping people out. The fucking amount of people that I saw on Steam going, I can't believe they're forcing black people in this game. That's not historically accurate. Are you fucking out of your mind? People travel, whether that's 800 BC or 1400 AD or 2000 AD. People traveled. And even if you weren't happy about the black people being there, it's one fucking person. One person.
This is why I'm saying the limits of the critique. I like that you attempted to deal with this, but I found that you went from 0 people to 1 person. Slightly undercuts what you could have done here.
But also, that's late. That character appears late in the game, and I think probably one of the first diversity character encounters people are going to find in the game is Chaim, the Jewish merchant character.
So is this the guy in the camp, in the horse camp?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't realize he was Jewish. That's on me. I'm
not subtle.
No, it's not. But I am very dense.
This is a character who is a merchant vendor who is Jewish, and it's well established, and you can look at the character and see that he's of the Jewish faith or Jewish people, ethnically Jewish. There's a sort of line of dialogue that Henry can engage with, to a lot of NPCs, which is pretty much like how you going? What's going on in the area? And you can say this to him, and his immediate response is, pay me.
Yeah, it really is. He's like, hey, I'm not going to give information for free. Like, what's...
Yeah, well, that's it. And Henry can basically respond saying, I'm sorry, what? And he goes, what? You think I should dispense advice for free? And that is all that character does, as well as act as a vendor. And I've been playing Civilization 7 alongside this, and I had the opportunity to talk to some of those developers, and it's been very, very apparent to me about the Firaxis approach to representation is we spent months working with the Shawnee people to make sure they were represented exactly how they wanted to be, all this kind of stuff. And the developers at Warhorse seem to just be we watched Phantom Menace and thought Watto was a great character for Jewish rep in this game.
It's that fucking Perez movie that's making the rounds at the moment, the movie based on Mexico.
We don't have time to talk about Emilia Perez. We simply don't have time.
But yeah, when I thought that character was kind of strange, when you said, "Oh, they're Jewish," I'm like, "Oh, fucking no, they didn't." You haven't seen it yet, Jam, but boy, oh fucking boy, there is a complete sectioned off quarter of one of the major towns that's the Jewish quarter. There are players that, there are characters that are Jewish that you interact with quite a bit. I don't think it's so bad as the first time you see them, because looking at that is very yuck. And also, fucking spoilers, that's the only Jewish person you interact with for 30, 40 hours at least.
At least.
Yeah. I like the characters later on where they're they're kind of segregated in their own group. That sounded horrible, but you understand what I mean. They're separated off. They are very close-knit community. They're trying to integrate, but people fucking hate them. And that sucks, obviously, but that's history. And I think that like the way their area is designed is actually super cool. And like Henry can even like when you first meet them, you can like debate them on like
No, what are you doing? Why would you
yeah
debate them?
Debate
yeah
me. Oh my gosh.
yeah because they're like, oh, we don't let a goy in, and then you're like, oh, but a goy just means foreigner. Aren't we all technically foreigners here? And you're like,
Debate me.
fuck, Henry, can we not please? Jesus, it's
Oh,
But
very
even
strange.
I never found that gay hermit character in the first area. So
Oh,
like
didn't you?
my experience with the gay rep in this game was there was a mandatory story beat at about the
Mm,
midpoint, and that's not great. None of that is great. It's kind of dabbles at being interesting a little bit, but it's
mm.
also such a fucking tired trope.
Yeah, it is a bit rough. It is a bit rough in that regard. So from what I understand, um, the creative director wrote the first game, or at least had a lot of oversight over the first game. In this one, when they did the storyboarding, he was off for whatever reason. And then when he came back, it was mostly designed, and he gave it his okay. And that's kind of the big leopard eating faces here moment where he's like, yeah, guys, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, it's, there is gay people in the game. There is a black person in the game. There are Jewish people in the game. We don't always hate the Cumans. Um, and people are like, I can't believe you're turning on us like this. And he's just like, I don't, like, I've never understood this level of hate in my life about anything. Like,
I still
it's
find it so
so
funny.
confusing.
I still find
It's
it so funny.
fucking hilarious.
Well, I still find
But
it so
like,
funny that this man before Kingdom Come 2, he wrote Mafia and Mafia 2, and I love those games.
mm,
But I love that as soon as he was gone, they made Mafia 3, which is the most woke video game in the last decade.
yeah, I haven't played Mafia 3. I was actually super interested to hear that discussion come up, which is why I think like these discords among our community is actually super important. How did you find the representation, Fergus? Enjoy this small hand grenade I have passed to you.
Thanks. I thought the stuff with Samuel, if I'm remembering the name right, Samuel and the Jewish Quarter, I thought that was actually more well done, and I think that the third act of the game digs into the politics of it a bit more.
Yep.
And it's a bit more nuanced than the early stuff.
There's something to be said though for like even if it's core story, if it's if it's effectively in a part of the game that vast majority of most players won't get to, what does it stand for? What does it mean? What's it worth?
No, I mean some of the stuff, the late game stuff is like the Jewish core stuff. That's definitely core story. So you would definitely see if you play through. I think it's one of those things where it's almost a side effect of the game being so over designed and so enormously long that on some level once they've like done the first idea in their head, they kind of got to do something else and they got to dig a little deeper. And I definitely felt like the further you get into the game, there's definitely way better stuff in there, even in terms of side quests,
Totally.
stuff like that. And all of that representation, like I said, I don't know. Would I like the timeline where, like the first game, they just pretend gay people or black people didn't exist, or would I like the timeline where they do it badly? I don't know. It's kind of hard to say.
God, that is actually a really interesting discussion point.
Because that was, from my memory, the whole debate with the first game was just that they were like, we talked to some historians, and the historians we talked to reckon probably not, and then other historians are like, well, actually, and then hence a lot of the other debate, but like. I do think that this feels less mostly for the better. It does make sense that the creative director was less hands-on with every aspect of the story, and I think it's mostly better for it. I think it's probably where a lot of the weird charm in the world can come from.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is certainly a game. I will say that about
it. Most games. A video game. I think one of the lines I have in my notes is just like, this is extremely a video game where you do something and then an NPC walks over and says, "Stop there, citizen." And if that's the kind of nonsense you're into, like,
well, no, it's a video game where you spend 4 hours trying to work out how to do something, and then the NPC comes over and
so stop there, citizen. And you're like, did either of you get branded as a criminal?
did not. I actually the worst thing I had happen to me as a criminal
Uh,
was they fined me. But my Henry is a good boy. I want that to
I
be
sort of
off the record.
ended up doing a crime, which then, I had to do other crimes to cover up that crime, and eventually it all caught up with
Oh,
me. And I had the option of losing all my money, and I was like, "Phew, I have a lot of money. How
yeah.
bad could this I'll take my punishment option be?" And so Henry got branded a criminal. There's a whole bespoke cutscene where he's like strung up and they brand him a criminal. And then I got a debuff where for like a period of weeks I could not interact with any merchants.
Holy shit. Yeah, I really
Which
love what they've done with the crime in this game. It's
which
so
like yeah.
vast.
But being branded a criminal all of a sudden meant that a ton of other options for other quests I was doing were kind of not possible to be done, and it forced me to be like, "Oh, I need to, disguise for this place, and I can't just go buy it because no merchant will talk to me." Huh?
More crime.
How else can I solve this problem? Probably more crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do love
Wow.
the amount of ways the game gives you to solve certain problems. There is actually an achievement. There's actually two achievements one I really, really want to do and find out how it's done, which is hang a pair of trousers off hang a pair of used underwear off the tavern, very used, which is called Under the Brown Flag, which I think is just hilarious because I am a child. The other one was talk your way out of getting executed, which I think is so hilarious in and of itself that I desperately want to try it, but I didn't feel like I could do that to Henry in my game, but I do want him. Like, he can get executed as a crime, as a punishment. I think that's fucking amazing.
I do love some of the dialogue options you have if like you break a law and the NPCs come to arrest you or whatever, and you can be like, whoa, no, it's just a misunderstanding, and then they're like, yeah, all right, no, fair enough, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that it gives you all like options like that is so funny and wonderful.
Yeah, it's very, very
It's
good.
very silly.
I actually will be playing this through again at some stage, but I'm going to wait because, again, I am a psychopath for the hardcore mode, which, to explain this for Jam, it's a much more difficult mode where the loot you get is a lot worse, and you get 9 debuffs permanently that are very bad. One of them is if you have a helmet on with the face down, you suffer from claustrophobia, and you are 20% worse at all of your skills.
I found the face down mask thing impossible to work with anyway.
Oh, it's awful to work with. I never had my mask down.
Don't protect your head.
Yeah, gotta protect your head. I mean, look, you really do. You will die very quickly if you get a head injury. Another one of them is all of your skills level up 40% slower. And another one is you have nightmares. So after you wake up, all your skills are -2 for like a couple of hours. There is some fucking wild things I cannot wait to try because I am odd like that. But they've already announced, I think, 3 pieces of DLC for this game over the next year, at least. If it's anything like the first game, I'm going to be super duper into it because I found all the DLC really, really fun. One, you got to play as Teresa in the same way I'm hoping you get to play as Catherine in this game, because I thought Catherine was a super fucking cool character. Apparently she's an amalgam of like a bunch of different Catherines in the time period, which I think is cool. I actually really liked her, so I'm very excited to see if I can play as her. And there is another couple of ones that were also pretty interesting that I'm going to see if they do something similar. So who knows? This game is going to change, hopefully for the better, over the next like 6 months, as almost all games do nowadays, where like they launch in a certain state and then they get quality of life patches for the next little bit. So I'm very excited to see how this goes over the next bit.
I am also probably going to jump back in when the DLC comes out. I don't think I'm going to play the hardcore mode. I'm not that insane. I'm not that
Look,
much
I get it. I hear you.
I have been thinking about checking out the Switch port though of the first game because it's been so long since I played it.
Oh, I wonder if that Switch port is good. Like, I mean, they released it. It can't be awful, right? I don't play
There's some
very much
Switch
on my
ports out there.
Switch, so
I've played. I've seen some things.
look,
How
I
are you,
came
Joe?
from loving the Vita. I know what bad ports are like. I've earned my stripes. But yeah, I think it'll be very cool. Honestly, Jam, it's been awesome to have you here, especially because while we wax lyrical about this, it's good to see, a differing opinion. So it's not just a love fest here, and also especially because you hadn't played the first one, which is a huge difference. So that's really, really cool. I think we'll probably wrap it up there. We've been talking for so long, and I've run out of water, so my throat is getting very parched. But thank you to you both. Fergus, where can people find your work?
People can find my work at reviews.org/au, and you can also find my newsletter Multiplier at multiplier.substack.com. And you can find me on Blue Sky at CVAM.
Nice. And Jam, what about you? Where can you find your work, and what are your socials? If you
you can find me at any place that'll have me. Commonly a lot on Games Hub and Stevivor at the moment. You can find me at Jamware everywhere. Blue Sky is where I'm most active. Yeah.
And as for me, Jason Hawkins, you can find my work on player2.net.au. As per the usual, you can't find me on socials because I am a hermit, but a married
No,
hermit.
you're
so at least
free.
I get-
You're free. You're
Yeah.
free. Just
Honestly,
don't apologize.
it's not bad. You should try it. It's not bad.
I wish it could be me.
Why wasn't it me? This has been a lot of fun. Thank you to you both, and go check out their reviews and work, and send them all the love because they have spent time with me, and that's never easy. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.